would like to welcome you all to Camp Pinnacle, which has been our labor of love for the last 5 years, restoring this camp from bankruptcy to a place that educates children all summer long. And we currently have a school group here from Florida. They're all off in the woods camping. And we have weddings pretty much every single weekend when we don't run camp in the summer. But we're not here to talk about camp. We are here to talk about Maureen and appreciate you coming out to meet Maureen and to learn more about Maureen. I do not in any way want to disparage her competitor, but just when I saw who was on the Republican ticket as far as his age, he's a really nice kid. Hardworking, but to imagine that somebody 24 years old could be our representative in the State House. And that's a job that has huge import. It affects our lives in so many ways. And then to see the qualifications of Maureen, and I don't know about you, but I want my representative to be somebody that inspires me, somebody that has a long record of public service, a lot of experience, and someone who's served our country in the Navy for 30 years, supervised a $100 million budget, managed thousands of people. I'm just really, really impressed with this woman and would be so excited to have her representing my business, representing my family, and the residents of North Carolina 113. It's a critical election, and what scares me is the district is 62% Republican, and I worry that over 50% of the people will not take the time to look at the two distinct choices and will just push a button, not realizing they're voting for a 24-year-old without experience. So I hope if you are impressed with Maureen and feel like I do that she's a good representative of our district, that you'll tell your friends and encourage them to support her, because when the information is there, I think people will almost unanimously select Maureen. So I hope you'll join me. Will you give her a round of applause and welcome Maureen?
Thank you, John. I really appreciate you hosting this event, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to come here this afternoon. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my background and why I'm running. My background, as John said, I'm a Navy captain. I spent 30 years serving in the Navy. I went to the University of South Carolina. I graduated in the mid-70s with a degree in religious studies. Got out, found out that I was completely unemployable with that degree. So I got a job typing, which if you remember the mid-70s, that's about what women did back then. I got a job typing cards in a library. Remember those cards? Before we had those computers, we had the little card catalog. So I spent 4 years of my life, I typed probably 20,000 of those little cards. But I went to night school, and I got my master's in business administration. And I thought, okay, now I am going to go out and I'm going to get a job. And I had specialized in production management, thinking I was going to go into the textile industry, which was really big in the Carolinas back in the 70s. So I went on job interview after job interview, and I didn't get a single job offer. And finally, one man, at least he had the courage to tell me, he looked at me and he said, "Honey, nobody's going to hire you into production management. That's a man's job. But I'll hire you as my receptionist." So I said, okay, plan A, the degree in religion didn't work. Plan B, my MBA going into textile manufacturing isn't working well. I need a plan C. Well, at the same time, the military had gone to the all-volunteer force after Vietnam. And guess what? They weren't getting enough men volunteering. So what did they do? They opened that door to women, just a little bit, just a crack. They didn't open everything. Believe me, that took 40 more years. But they opened that door, and some of us walked through that door, joined the Navy, and we made a career of it. So that's how I ended up in the military, and I loved it. And I realized I didn't need to come back and try and get a job in a manufacturing plant, because all the skill sets that I learned with my MBA, I utilized in the Navy. Because running a Navy base, running a command, you use those same skills. You better understand financial management, because you've got taxpayer dollars that you're accountable for. You better understand personnel management. You better understand leadership. Yeah. So all of those same skills are the skills that I managed to use for 30 years in the Navy. So the real question that people ask me when I meet them now is, why in the world would a retired Navy captain, happily retired with her husband of 36 years, my husband Sylvan is over there, happily retired in Brevard, where my dad lives, I've got family, why would you run in politics? Well, one of the things the military teaches you is that it teaches you when you see something that needs to be improved, you don't ignore it. You don't hope somebody else steps up. The military teaches you to take responsibility, to do your very best, and to try and correct the situation. And I got so unhappy with some of the policies that I saw being implemented in this state that I said, you know, I could do better than the people we're electing. And one of the things I think has happened in Raleigh is our politicians have lost sight of what they should be focused on. And that is improving the lives of the people that they were elected to represent. There are two questions that I believe every politician should ask themselves before they pass legislation. The first question is, do I have all the facts? Have I talked to all of the different viewpoints? Because when you make a decision, you want to make a decision from a position of knowledge. And you can't do that if you go in thinking you already have the answer. So it's important to get all the facts, to listen to people, even people that you don't necessarily agree with. Now, I serve on the Transylvania County Planning Board. Very diverse makeup on this board. Chris Hovey right here, he's on the board with me. We often don't agree with one another. And there's 7 members, and we all have different viewpoints. And I would often go in thinking, gee, I really want my viewpoint. I want to get this, the way I want it. And when I finish listening to people, and we finish working on it, I realized that in the end, we came up with a better solution because we had 7 different people with 7 different perspectives working together as a team. And the ultimate solution was better than what I would have come up with on my own. So I think it's really important that the first thing our politicians have to do is they have to be willing to have that dialogue, and they have to be willing to work with one another. The second question a politician has to ask themselves is, if I pass this legislation, will it help the people that I was elected to represent? Not will it help some special interest, and not will it help make a partisan political statement, but will it help the people? Because ultimately, the job that you are electing me to do is to be your representative, to represent you. So I think that one of the reasons that we are having so many problems in Raleigh is that our politicians aren't asking themselves these 2 questions. They're not very hard questions. Now, in the Navy, there are 3 words that every member of the Navy is taught. From the seaman recruit, 18 years old, who's been on board 1 day, to the 4-star admiral, which is the highest rank in the Navy. You are taught and you are expected to live by these 3 words. They are the Navy's core values. And they are honor, courage, and commitment. Now, if we can hold an 18-year-old seaman recruit to these standards, I sure think we ought to be holding our politicians to these same standards. And when you fail to ask those 2 questions, when you fail to really have the dialogue that's needed, and when you fail to really ask, will it help the people, then you are not acting with honor or courage or commitment. So we've got to get back to some very fundamental values when we elect people. Now, I am committed to this region and to trying to improve the quality of life for the people here. And there are 4 things that I believe that need to be worked on, that I want to prioritize and work on when I'm in Raleigh. The first is ensuring that we have a diversified and strong economy here with good paying jobs. Now that's not an easy goal. That's one of the most difficult goals. But all 4 of these areas need to work together. So some people will say, they'll say, well, we need jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We can forget everything else. We should sacrifice the environment. You know, we don't care about anything except jobs. But in the long run, that's the wrong way to go. Because we've got to balance getting good paying jobs with a good public education, with affordable health care for everybody, including the middle class right now that's having some real issues, and with a healthy environment. And so those are the 4 things that I believe will work together. So to attract jobs here, I believe we've got to have good governance, which means we've got to have a competitive tax rate, we've got to have competitive incentives, we've got to have a business-friendly environment where we welcome businesses. We also need to properly promote this area using the assets that we have in Western North Carolina to get the types of businesses that we want to come and locate here. Besides good governance, we've got to have good infrastructure, which means we've got to take care of our roads, our bridges, but we've also got to have that electronic infrastructure now, because so many businesses are relying on high-speed broadband. They need to have that. So there are a number of things that we need to have in terms of infrastructure. And finally, we've got to have a good quality of life. Businesses locate where there's a good quality of life for their families, their employees. And a good quality of life leads me to something very important, and that is good public education. Now, I believe education, public education, is one of those foundations of our democracy. You want to have a well-educated and well-informed citizenry to have a strong democracy. I've been all over the world. I have seen places where you don't have that education, you don't have the democracy, and you don't have the future for the children in those countries. So what's happened with public education in North Carolina? It used to be one of the top-rated states, but we have systematically made decisions that have lessened the quality of public education. We have 3 systems right now. We've got traditional public education, we've got charter schools, and we have vouchers, where people take public money and they go to private schools. Now, if you ask yourself, if you only have so much money, you only have so much revenue coming in, and you want to have a high-quality public education system, if you divide that money up into 3 separate pots, how are you going to have all 3 of them be that high-quality education? So I think we need to ask ourselves some really hard questions. You know, yes, it's great that people have choices, but if we don't have the money, maybe we need to be cutting back on those vouchers. We need to be putting that public money back into public education. We need to be putting a cap back on the number of charter schools. So I think the goal is that every child needs to have access to high-quality public education. And that should be the very first use of our public education dollars. People will say to me, well, you know, you want to put more money into education, that means you want to raise taxes. And I said, well, you know, if we make the right decisions with the money that we have and we don't divide it up in all these different pots and we put it into public education, we can make a whole lot of improvements with the money that's already in the revenue stream. It comes down to what are the priorities and how are you going to use the revenue that the state has. So education is something that I think we really need to focus on. Healthcare Healthcare is another thing that is critical to quality of life.